festival gave thanks for ripening corn, and late fall's harvest festival gave thanks for the harvested crops, which coincides with the Hebrew biblical customs. There's a dearth of information about the midwinter festival, the last one of the old year. Squanto, a member of the Pocono Wampanoag Nation, was from Patuxet. In 1605, he traveled to England with English explorer John Weymouth, where he learned the language of English. After he returned to New England, Squanto was captured by a British slave owner and sold to Spaniards in the Caribbean islands. A Franciscan priest helped him get to England via Spain. Squanto found Weymouth, who paid his way home. While in England, Squanto met Samoset, Wabanaki tribe member, who also left England with an English explorer. They returned to Patuxet in 1620. When they arrived, they found a deserted village and skeletons of those who had died from smallpox, which English slave owners and explorers brought with them. They stayed with neighboring Wampanoags. In the spring of 1621, Squanto and Samoset were hunting near Patuxet and saw pilgrims in the deserted village. They watched the colonists for several days before they approached them and offered to teach them New World survival skills. On March 22, 1621, there was a peace treaty between the English Pilgrim leaders and the Wampanoag Confederacy. The leader of the Wampanoag Confederacy was Massasoit. When news spread in England about the New World paradise, more pilgrims and other Europeans immigrated to the New World. The Europeans considered the land as public domain because there were no fences. The pilgrims and other Europeans disregarded Native Americans as the indigenous people of the land. The European pilgrims believed the natives were savages, even though the pilgrims learned from Squanto how to cultivate corn, vegetables, so they would not have any more food shortages. Squanto showed them how to build Indian-style houses instead of living in the dirt-covered shelters the pilgrims were living in. Despite all of this, the Europeans still believed they were savages. The Indians supplied the majority of the pilgrims' food. Contrary to the fabricated lore of storyteller generations, no pilgrims prayed at the meal. What's more, they consumed a good deal of home brew. In fact, each pilgrim drank at least a half-gallon of a beer a day, which they preferred even to water. This daily inebriation led their governor, William Bradford, to comment on his people's notorious sin, which included their drunkenness and uncleanliness and rampant sodomy. Later, as the European pilgrims grew in number, they started showing intolerance to the Indians and their religion. The relationship deteriorated between the pilgrims and the Indians. Any Indian who came within the vicinity of the pilgrim settlement was subject to robbery, enslavement, or even murder. The pilgrims further advertised their evil intentions when they mounted 5 cannons on a hill around their settlement, constructed a platform for artillery, and then organized their soldiers into 4 companies, all in preparation for the military destruction of the Native American Indians in their own land. In 1637, over 700 Pequot men, women, infants, and children gathered for their Green Corn Festival, which is America's Thanksgiving celebration today. In the pre-dawn morning, the sleeping Indians in their villages were surrounded by Dutch and English mercenaries who ordered them to come outside of their villages. Those who obeyed were shot, clubbed to death. Women and infants and children huddled inside the long village houses, burned alive, were hung upside down, tortured, Infants beaten and killed, slammed against walls, and hung by their ankles. The next day, the governor of the Massachusetts Bay Colony declared a day of thanksgiving because 700 unarmed men, women, infants, and children were murdered. The wicked and brave European pilgrim colonists attacked village after village. Women and children over 14 years of age were sold into slavery while the rest were murdered. Boats loaded with as many as 500 native Indian slaves regularly left the ports of New England, Massachusetts, sending slaves abroad. Bounties were paid for Indian scalps to encourage as many deaths as possible. Following an especially successful raid against the Pequot in now Stamford, Connecticut, the churches announced a second day of Thanksgiving to celebrate victory over the heathen savages. During the feasting, the hacked-off heads of natives were kicked through the streets like soccer balls. Even the friendly Wampanoag did not escape the madness. Their chief was beheaded, and his head impaled on a pole in Plymouth, Massachusetts, where it remained on display for 24 years. The killings became more and more frenzied, with days of Thanksgiving feasts being held after each successful massacre. George Washington finally suggested that only one day of Thanksgiving per year be set aside instead of celebrating each and every massacre. Later, Abraham Lincoln decreed Thanksgiving Day to be a legal national holiday during the Civil War. On the same day, he ordered troops to march against the starving Sioux in Minnesota.
Much as a production.